Welcome to the Masters of Automation podcast episode. Today we have Jonathan Reilly with us. Jonathan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Al.
So Jonathan is co-founder and COO at Akkio. Akkio is a low-code AI application platform. Before Akkio, Jonathan worked at Sony as an engineer, and then that led his path to be a product manager at Sonos, where he's seen the startup in early days as well as the scale. And then later he joined Markforged, where he became a product leader and led marketing. And Markforged is a 3D printing company for both industrial goods as well as beyond. So now he is running the startup called Akkio with also my previous high school classmate, Akin, and then got started there as the COO right now. So it's a pleasure to have you today and have the opportunity to hear your story. And you have a very diverse background. You were an engineer, you were in product, you were now in operations, you led marketing, you've seen startups grew and scale, as well as you worked at large companies like Sony. And now you guys are kicking off your own startup, and which you already, I think, locked Series A as well. So what is your story like? Like, what led you to Sony and then later to Markforged? Like, where did it all start?
Yeah, well, I guess it kind of goes back to undergraduate, and I grew up in Montana, interestingly, and my father was a professor of marketing at Montana State University in Bozeman, and I was kind of disenfranchised with the education system in high school. I didn't really think it was teaching me much, and I decided in my head as a rebellious teenager that I was not going to go to school. I didn't want to go to university. Like I could tell it would be the same thing that was happening in high school. But my dad, he told me I couldn't leave the house until I applied to a couple of schools, and then he even picked out a couple of schools for me to apply to. One of which was actually Gonzaga University, where I ended up going. And at the time in high school, the one thing that was really interesting to me was speech and debate. I was on the policy debate team, and we were ranked #1 in the state of Montana, so we were pretty good. We went to nationals. And Gonzaga had a debate program, and so I got into that school despite not trying very hard in high school. And I was going to do pre-law originally. I get into the pre-law classes, and they're really like much too easy, and it's kind of the same story. I decided to go to Gonzaga because I realized that college was going to be a party. I'm like, this is going to be great. I can just have fun for 4 years. And once I had that realization, I'm like, I'm definitely going to school. But so I got into the pre-law classes, and they were not engaging. And so fortunately, I was taking some of the advanced math classes and physics classes because I'd been in some AP classes in high school, and that turned into electrical engineering. And so how did I end up at Sony? Well, one day in my senior year, I sat down on monster.com back in the day, and I applied to every electrical engineering job in California. I wrote up my my application and my cover page to say what I wanted to do, which was design work. And a couple of companies got back to me, and when I reviewed the ones that got back to me, it looked like I'd written my application specifically to their job. But that was just about the fit. I really just used the shotgun approach. And so I got hired and moved to San Diego to start doing design engineering on video processing circuitry for CRT televisions back in the day at Sony. And I did that for 7 years. And it was really exciting, like lots of learning. But eventually it kind of got a little bit slow. It's like each year you're going to do the same thing over and over again, design the next TV, and they ship a new model of TV every year. And sooner or later you get a little bit bored. But I'm working at the time with a lot of product managers who are making the decisions about the features of the television. And I had a lot of questions about how those decisions were being made as an engineer. And, I think this is a very, very traditional engineer product manager like interaction where, product management asks for some feature and engineering is like, that feature doesn't make sense for one reason or another. And product management is like, do it anyways. And so, as an engineer, you're like, okay, and you do it. And then, later they like reverse, I have a good anecdote. Like there was a time where they asked us to put in this extra audio processing chip And it would push the bill of materials over the limit, that the bill of materials could be at by about $3. And we're like, if we put this chip in, the bill of materials is going to be $3 over. And they're like, do it. I was like, oh, okay. So we put it in, and then the next roll up from the factory comes back, and it's $3 over, and they come down and they're like, we got to take $3 out of the bill of materials. I'm like, really? It's like, you got any ideas? I'm like, well, there's this audio chip, and sure enough, I was like, take it back out. And so, anyways, one of the product managers who's actually pretty good that I was working with, he took a new role, and they asked him who he thought could replace him. And he actually suggested that I might make an interesting candidate because I was always questioning their decisions and trying to understand the logic behind it. And so I moved into product management, my first product management role at Sony. And I spent about a year and a half working on stuff there. And it was actually really beneficial to be able to take your engineering knowledge of the technology space, and then meet that with market understanding of opportunity and value propositions. And I found that like incredibly fascinating because, you not only had to like think of what would be good to do and why it would be good to do it, but make sure that it was actually possible to do within the constrained decision-making environment, right? So that actually that part of it ended up being like really exciting for me. The part that I liked a little bit less was Sony's a really big company, and it's hard to have a really big impact as a young person coming up at a really big company. I mean, you can, but you're kind of always injected in these like HR systems that are designed to like govern your growth slowly and stuff like that. But anyways, so I'm working in product management, and this guy, Phil Abram, who is the head of North America marketing for Sony TV, ended up leaving and taking a job at Sonos back when they were very small, and they were hiring product managers, and he suggested that I apply. And I met the team there. I'd never really heard of Sonos before. I was like, I don't know what this small company is. Like, I'm working at the number one, at the time, Sony was number one in television. I'm like at the number one television company here. But then I met the team, and everyone I met was, some of the smartest people that I met. And so I made the decision then, like, I'm going to work with these people. I'm going to learn from them. It's a startup, may not work out, but I'll have an opportunity to learn quite a bit. And as it turns out, it did work out. In the working out, grew my responsibility and career, and ended up leading product management on a bunch of the products that they built. Many of them still shipping in some iteration today, and watched it grow from, I think it was something like 60, 70 million in revenue when I joined to almost $1 billion in revenue when I left. So
you've seen the full scale up. You've seen the full scale up story. Pretty
big scale up opportunity there. And it's interesting because like you hit these like on the way up, when you're growing, you always hit these like stall points, I think. And I've seen this happen like multiple times now where, you have an idea and you bring it forward, and maybe that's a new product category or a new feature that you bring to market, and it, grows really fast for a while. But once you lap that growth, like you're back to growing slowly again, and you need something else to like keep growing, right? Like there's this constant like hunger for growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. But it was just a really fun run. And towards the end of it, when it was really big, I really missed those early startup days where it was like your life is on the line. If you don't make the right decisions, like things are going to go poorly. It's just like very motivating to like wake up every day and realize that, like you might not survive. The company might not make it. And like the responsibility for getting it across the finish line, for like keeping it alive, like is on you. And for me at least, that ends up being like super motivating because I just want to like make it work and do whatever it takes. And so I actually had my second child, my daughter, and on paternity leave, I spent some time thinking, and I'm like, I think I'd like to jump into an earlier stage startup, and that led me to Markforged, totally different industry, but. I asked a product manager I'd worked with at Sonos, who he thought in the Boston area was interesting for me to speak with. And he made an introduction to Greg Mark, who is the CEO of Markforged. And I met the team there, Abe and Ekin and everybody, actually people that are co-founders in Akkio today. And it was the same basic experience I had when I first joined Sonos, which is, I thought this was a group of really, really smart people that I could learn a lot from. And early on at Markforged, I asked, before I took the role of leading product there, to speak to some of the customers, and it was clear they had like emerging product market fit. Like, the 3D printing, they 3D print, continuous strands of carbon fiber wound inside of nylon matrices. And these parts replace like tooling and fixtures on manufacturing lines. This is the sort of core value proposition at the time. Of course, they print lots of things now. And the people who were like maintaining these manufacturing lines were paying like 10 times as much for machined aluminum, and it was taking 10 times as long to get those parts in. So it was like an order of magnitude improvement in their workflows, and they just loved the printer. So there was something really like already there at its core. And we built it and launched new printers and scaled the company up. It was a wild, fun ride, like just as stressful and exciting as I imagined it would be. Towards the end, I ended up taking on some more responsibility in marketing when we had some issues with sort of our lead pipeline and deal flow. And I realized, like the thing my dad taught at Montana State University was marketing. And so like, I'm an engineer, right? I'm never going to be in marketing. And so here I find myself like actually running marketing. I'm like, I'm not so sure I want to do this. Like, this is like, but it turns out actually, a lot of the optimization in a B2B marketing workflow is around data pipelines and efficiency, and doing like some math on figuring out like where your best dollar spent to like closed one deal sits, and how to like invest against the market of like opportunities of advertising to maximize your qualified lead funnel. There's always these like tricky incentive structures between marketing and sales. In this case, like marketing was incentivized to make marketing qualified leads. I think that's pretty typical. But the definition of those leads had been established a long time ago, and it's just kind of apparent that if you could use machine learning to match the firmographics and the title and the behaviors that a lead that came into the system had taken to your already closed won or closed lost business, that would be a much more effective way of deciding who to reach out to first, how to engage, how aggressively to engage. It basically make the entire pipeline run more efficiently. So, this founding story of Akkio is we started looking for solutions on the market that would let us do things like that would let us create smart robotic process automation workflows based on like natural language input from users who filled a form. And we couldn't really find anything that let us build it. There were some solutions we tried on the market that had somebody else build it for us. They didn't work very well. And we realized that, and they were also application specific. And one of the problems is application specific solutions tend to be least common denominator solutions. An application specific ML solution kind of has a right to live because you're an expert in the application, not necessarily an expert in ML. And there's always this tension between the business group and the person delivering a machine learning model of understanding like what the objectives are and what the data actually says. And this even exists internal to companies. So that the spark of the idea there was, it would be really nice if there was a platform that allowed people to take an arbitrary data table for any application you might have, and model the outcome of interest, understand the patterns that are driving that outcome, and then in a couple of clicks use it for real-time decision making. And that idea is the sort of core idea of Akkio. And of course, we've built lots of stuff since that sort of original idea. But the main thesis was that ease of use and enablement would make it so that a lot of people who today do sort of traditional data analysis in Excel or Tableau or Power BI, would be able to leverage machine learning in their processes and extract more value from their data faster, and that would be like meaningfully impactful for a ton of businesses. So assuming that any data-driven process in any business will eventually run on machine learning, the market's incredibly massive, and that's what we've been up to, is building Akkio. So we founded it and raised a friends and family round, and then seed round from Bain Capital, and made some progress on the A round. We haven't announced anything yet, but made some progress there too.
That's a very impressive story, and I think throughout your journey, you've seen how a company can not only scale but can maintain the culture that it has. And I think over time, that is one of the tough parts to maintain, right? Like as
culture is really hard, particularly if you're scaling. I mean, if you some of the times in scaling, you double your headcount in like 1 year. And if you think about that, like half the people in the company came in from other cultures, and the other half the people there, maybe half of them have only been there for a year by the time this influx happens. It takes a lot of considered thought. I think the leadership of Sonos did it quite well. We worked on it really hard at Markforged too. It stretches from like onboarding and orientation to like setting examples and leading through examples like every time you can. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that at Akkio too. Making sure that we're building the right type of culture. The things we focus on, for what it's worth, are, really, we want a culture of ownership. I think your most successful companies, and the only way that you can really effectively scale, is if you can empower people to have agency. This concept of hiring agents, I talk about a lot, because hiring someone who will just do what they're told and execute and do that fast and efficiently, that's good, but it's not sufficient, right? Like having someone who will think through the problem space, take ownership, be able to make decisions, or come back and say, this is how we should solve this problem, and why, and defend that point of view. That's what you're looking for, I think. And sometimes like culture gets very political and it gets very hierarchical, and you have like, I can't, talk to the person who's my manager's manager with an idea, because my manager would get upset that I, skip leveled them or something, or went over their heads. I frequently say, if I ever hear that happening with anyone reporting in my infrastructure, whoever was in the middle doesn't need to be there anymore. They can just go, right? Like, because I think like the only way you get that agency is like collective ownership, shared incentive structure with stock, and then really empowering people to make decisions and take ownership. But again, like very difficult to do. And it actually gets harder in my experience when companies get bigger and growth slows down, because then the stock component of the compensation becomes less impactful. And when everyone's fighting over some salary dollars, it kind of quickly becomes a little bit of a political game to try and like get the promotion to SVP or something, and like that's your win condition. There's this idea, I think, and we talked about it at Markforged, of like two dreams in China. It's like the dream of your personal success, and then the dream of the country success. I think it's like actually pretty similar at a business, and you want both dreams to be alive and well if your culture is going to be tight.
Yeah, definitely, and I think there's the transparency and the visibility of the goals of the team and the company and the individual when they align well, and top of the motivation that there will be more success later on if you continue to accomplish more. I think becomes a very sweet spot in those deals, that which is very interesting, because I think there are a lot of companies who struggle to scale. Maybe after you reach 1,000 people, then it's no longer a small friends, family, and then I think group to community, then to become a country at that point, right? So like
I think in my experience, the tipping point's been around 300 people, like 200 to 300 people, somewhere in there. It tips over. We'll see if we get that big at Akkio, which I hope we do. We'll see how we can hold that off, and still hopefully have a culture of agency.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys will accomplish that. I think one of the interesting aspects of you've seen how Sony was, how Sonos was, how Markforged was, and seeing both as an engineer's perspective, a product manager's perspective, as a marketer's perspective. I think there are a lot of lessons learned for Akkio that maybe the company could have done better in the past, or maybe they could have strategized certain things better. So what are some things that you learned over time that when you guys were starting Akkio, you all sat together and you're like, okay, this is the 3 things that we are doing for sure?
I don't know that we were that explicit. Obviously we were going to build a really great product experience. Really what I think the trick is to be really clear with your strategy and your decision-making frameworks, and to set those up early, because people need like the way that a company operates and its sort of thesis on the market opportunity is built on some principle thoughts, or some constructed frameworks. And when someone comes new into a company, they don't know, and they certainly haven't spent a lot of time thinking about what the frameworks for decision making are. And so practically the only way to get everybody rowing in the same direction as things scale is to be really clear and explicit around, here is how we prioritize the product roadmap, for example. Here's the priority framework, and here is the strategy. And a good strategy is like an umbrella. It's there's things that are inside of the umbrella that are on strategy, and then it excludes a bunch of things you could do that would be off strategy. So for example, at the beginning, and by the way, strategies change and can be refreshed, periodically. But at the beginning at Sonos, for example, it was fill everyone's home with music. We were very focused on the home. So, nobody came in and would suggest some out of home experience for audio that we would focus on, like concerts, or I don't know what else. There's a long list of audio experiences you have outside of your home, and probably lots of interesting opportunities for a sound company to go invest in those areas. But it was sort of like a focusing lever, so to speak. And I think just getting those sort of here's what we do, here's what we don't, and why, things detailed out, and then telling them to everybody, pretty frequently, and summarizing each bit of it as as in as pithy a manner as you possibly can, so that everyone can sort of hear it, remember it, and then sort of remember what unpacks underneath it, because no one's going to remember 3 paragraphs describing what a strategy actually means, but they'll remember the name of the strategy, and then that'll parse into oh yeah, this is why we're doing what we're doing. So strategy and decision making frameworks, I think, are incredibly necessary, and they're also very aligning, because as you make them, everyone either has to agree or disagree, and if you're not on the same page, then you got to dig deeper and find where your fundamental assumptions differ, right? Because if you share a set of fundamental assumptions, you should be able to construct a shared view of what to do. And so almost always there's some fundamental assumption difference, and it's good to get that dragged out into the light and look at it from multiple directions. And I think you always also have to have room for debate. Right, you have to be open to being wrong. You can't be right all the time, and when you're wrong, be the first person to stand up and admit it is my other tip. Acknowledge that you're wrong before anyone else points it out. That's a career accelerator for you.
That's a very good point. There's the in Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. There's a meeting structure that she introduced at Google and Apple, and then she says that when you're in two opposing directions and then there's an argument to be made, the first meeting is like each party protect their own idea and then try to make an argument to win, whatever it may be, whether that's about like product strategy or maybe a new feature addition or maybe competitive intelligence to blend into a new market. And then the next meeting, she's saying, okay, everyone now reverses the role. And now you need to defend his idea or her idea and vice versa. And then she's saying that like she finds that experience really interesting because then you have to study why the other person thinks differently.
What's really interesting is like if we go all the way back like to policy debate when I was in high school, that's what you do. Like you are either affirmative or negative, and you have to take either side of the topic each time you debate. And so like I think like out of all like high school sports I might recommend to someone, I think that would sort of be at the top of my list if you would call it a sport. It's maybe a mental sport. But it sort of forces that exact thing, which is you have to think through a problem from both sides of view, and then you have to like understand all of the arguments really well, and then you can like come to a conclusion of what you think is right and defend it and be passionate about your direction, because the important thing is you've sort of divorced your sort of personal worth in being right from the direction, and you're like really trying to just objectively look at the issue as best you can, right? Like I find like and this is hard for anyone. This is hard for me. Like, like if you think you're right about something, you kind of don't want to hear opposing evidence. It's like, I think that's like a little bit of human nature, honestly. And so you actually have to work at like being open to opposing evidence and thinking it through, and then, deciding like, oh yeah, like that convinced me, or yeah, I see that point, but here's why I don't think it's right.
It's I think we are biased by what we know by nature, right? Like because we defend that idea, and it's very interesting because then that is a fundamental reason why an innovation can happen, because then if both parties started to debate on a topic and then they argue whether it may be, and then that leads to new technologies to be born or look at different perspectives. And I would like to tie the discussion to the event at Harvard, which was really nice, which was really cool event. And it was very interesting because at the event, the main thing was low-code AI. We discussed about a bit of OpenAI products, generative technologies, in addition to RPA. And what I found very interesting was how the ideas of students, the tech leaders, the professors, and maybe mid-tier like product managers / engineers currently at Google and whatnot talk differently. So like as you gave a speech there as well. So like as you were speaking, what were some of the things that that you told, like while describing Akkio, the low-code AI?
Well, I think actually, I think the most interesting part of that presentation was the Q&A session at the end, where we talked about like ethics and like responsibility in machine learning. I think to your point, everybody like approaches a problem or solution space from their frame of reference. It's really all you have is your frame of reference. And so if you want to like learn, you're going to need to get exposure to people with different frames of reference, right? And you have to be kind of open to that. but it doesn't mean that everyone's point of view makes a ton of sense or that they've really thought things through. But it is good to get exposure to like really smart people's differing frames of reference, because then you'll learn, right? And so, I think like one of the reasons I like product management and like really love like working in product management is because you almost inherently have to like have a like position that works for everyone in the business, right? Like what you're trying to accomplish has to make sense to the sales team. It has to make sense to marketing. It has to make sense to engineering about building it. It has to make sense to the investors. Customer support has to believe that like it's going to be a good experience, like and that it's like a meaningful value add. You have to like you kind of have to work through all of those reference frames in order to like have a good position on what to do. And I think like the difference between good and bad product management really boils down to your ability to really explain to everybody like why, right? Like, and not everyone's always going to agree with you. I mean, there's been, there's always like an engineer who thinks you're wrong. And like regardless, I could just guarantee that that's always going to be the case. There'll always be a really smart engineer who thinks you're a complete idiot. And the challenge is going to be, explaining or convincing them, like to look at it from a slightly different reference frame than they're operating in. Being able to do that, being able to like tell the story and explain why, and it does help to have some technical background, so your asks are anchored in reality of possible implementation. That's kind of the trick to a good product manager. And I've been on the other side as an engineer, getting asked terrible dumb things that don't make any sense, some of them even implementable, but I just didn't believe the market. We could build this thing and it would take a lot of time and effort. I just really don't buy that this thing is going to sell. So it feels like I'm going to do a bunch of work for no reason. And that, that as an engineer, you hate that, right? And so sometimes it's like, hey, look, like, here's a way we can approach this problem that makes it tractable. But sometimes it's like, here's why this market is set up for this product to really succeed and how it's going to work in the market. And a lot of times if you're doing something innovative, those types of things don't exist. It's really kind of the fuzzy front end. You're dealing with a progressively loading JPEG problem, right? And you kind of got to like say, the picture's starting to resolve and it kind of looks like this.
I think an interesting part to that is especially in the field of low code, AI, ML, maybe automation, workflow management. There are different stakeholders, and each of the stakeholders need to hear the story from their own way. Like the business, like you said, maybe cares more about time efficiency or improved customer experience, whereas the engineer cares more about like how they can rebuild on a machine learning algorithm easier and without going through all the tests or retraining for hours. And then similarly for the end user, them experiencing a better product that actually works and functions. So I think in communicating the low code, the entire AI ML field, there's very nuances and different value propositions to everyone. And where do you see, and then obviously this varies by audience, but like the people getting challenged the most to adapt their own skill set, because they also need to acquire new skill set themselves and also adapt to new way of doing the work. And I think we see that often, that there are processes in large enterprises that they're done for like 25, 30 years, and somebody's been doing that.
The government is typically the worst at these things, right? They built a system like 50 years ago and we're still using them. It's kind of an interesting question. And I think like the pace of change is accelerating actually, like because technology is like going to happen faster and faster. And we've clearly hit this interesting inflection point in AI and machine learning right now. the way you used to do things is going to change, like sort of for everybody in some capacity. And that could be as basic as trying to learn about a topic using the internet, or as complex as like standing up an optimized workflow for your sales pipeline. I think a lot of people like get a little bit uncomfortable with change. It's sort of a core reaction that even I have. Change can be the only constant is change, but like change can be a little bit scary. But I found that the strategy of like leaning into like uncertainty and change is where you learn and grow the most as a person, regardless of if that's at work or at home or whatever it is. To be like really true, and now I almost seek it out because it's where you get like the most growth. And so everyone from an analyst who used to do sort of exploratory data analysis and graph like key trends and then try and like show what's driving them to a data pipelining engineer, they're going to have new tools at their disposal that are going to make them more effective and more efficient. I think one of the key skills to differentiate yourself is going to be a willingness to adopt early and to learn and to lean in to these types of changes, because if you wait around, eventually the change will get forced on you from competitive purposes, right? If your company doesn't adopt machine learning and everyone else does, you're going to be operating at a massive disadvantage. And sooner or later, that company will go out of business, and if you're working in that company, you're going to have to get a job at a company that has adopted machine learning, right? That's the adoption curve reality. There's always a group of people like leaned in more on the front end of things, and there's always a group of people who have been doing something the same way for a really long time and don't want to change. The late adopters or the late majority, as they might be, but I think the pace of change is accelerating, and the time you'll be able to like wait it out is getting shorter. So I think everyone's got to like be flexible and lean in as much as they can.
I think there's during my interview with Joy Mountford, she mentioned that sometimes she sees some engineers focus on mastering the tool. So for example, somebody is really great at Python certain package, or be really great at a certain vendor's product. And then she was saying, if that vendor or if that product or if that programming language one day disappears, then you need to learn the next thing. So like understanding the principles of how each work can give you the transferability of that knowledge. And I would like to tie this to you guys released a new feature on the I think it's a good generative tech feature where you'll be able to come in and you have the data, and then you can type in and to tell it to transform the data.
Chat data prep.
Chat data prep.
Yeah, chat data prep.
I think that's a great use case. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good example where what we do there, in case people aren't aware, because it's new, is we take a natural language request, like, and that could be anything like reformatting dates or like doing math or calculating things, and we translate it using a large language model into SQL to apply to your data set. And then we show you a preview of the transform that would happen on the data. We actually subsequently take the query that we generate and feed that back into a large language model and ask it to verbosely describe what's going to happen, because one of the key things is putting the human in the loop of this process, because it turns out while people might be pretty good at specifying exactly what they want with code, they're like a little bit less good at specifying exactly what they want with natural language. So showing like the interpretation of the ask helps them think through about the level of specificity that they need to have, or the corner cases. It's funny because it's like the classic product manager engineering interaction right laid bare in a user interface. Like I ask for a feature and the engineers come back and they're like, you didn't think about these 3 corner cases. What do we do here? And then I gotta specify what we do there. Same thing. But yeah, like, one of the interesting things about, low or no code, or using natural language to instruct a computer is these are all like just layers of abstraction to machine code, right? Like even like Python, like compiles into machine code to run on the computer. So this is just another layer of abstraction, and with it comes some complexity around specificity of like event handling or edge case concerns. But also with it comes the ability for a lot more people to use a mechanism they already use every day, language, to start to instruct systems to do what they want. That'll be incredibly powerful, right? That'll change like everything, because more people can do it with less barrier to entry. It saves like massive amounts of time and effort for the people doing it the old way. But a bunch of new people who couldn't figure out how to do I can't tell you, even myself, sometimes in Excel, I find myself Googling how to do like VLOOKUPs and like how to make a VLOOKUP properly work. It's like, it gets fairly painful sometimes, like, to be honest. It's just a lot easier to just ask for it,
Yeah. And I think like even things like Stack Overflow, for I think a lot of the Q&As happen where be able to take it, and I think then like the learning curve of and I'll pick this randomly, but like somebody who's extremely proficient in SQL, right? Like, or extremely proficient in the subcategories of SQL, then need to develop an understanding of how to communicate with the interface that is inputting the natural language, maybe in this case chatbot, to in such a right way so that it can generate the SQL query at the back.
We'll surface the actual generated query if you understand it, right? Like, and I think that's important for traceability, or like in some cases, like confirmation that the commands are executed correctly. And in these types of interfaces are new, and people have had a lot of time to develop a level of comfort with how software compiles into machine code. We're taking natural language and compiling it into software instructions, which are subsequently compiled into machine code. And I think it'll take a little bit of time to get those interfaces right, and that's why we built in some feedback loops. But they're going to get there. Like, it's just faster. Right. And so like it's faster and easier always wins. It's like time to result. At Sonos, we called it time to music, how long it took from when you hit play till sound was coming out of the speaker. We did a ton of crazy stuff to make that incredibly fast. We'd pre-buffer the song in memory that was queued up to play, start playing the song out of the memory buffer, and then transition it to the live stream from Spotify, like mid playback, so that you could get instant play response when you hit the play button. It's just faster and easier. But the team building the solution has to put a lot of thought into how to make that work. We're still trying to make the interface faster. I mean, it's pretty fast, but I want it to be faster. I want like almost instantaneous results when you ask for a transformation.
And that's the, I think, most impressive part, because the user thinks that, oh, there's this field box where I can come in and input anything that I like, but in the background there's like so much work that goes into that, building those natural models, the ML models, the response time to bring the result back to you in live, and then making sure that the tokens and the language are enough as well, so the database doesn't crash. So like tying that to a little bit of the like what is going on with the generative tech and OpenAI, I think it's a topic that became popular just recently, but it's been on the works for 6-7 years for now. And I think from what I've seen, I think it's going to start to get integrated a lot to companies, or maybe there are going to be new companies emerge like Jasper.ai, Scopy.ai on helping people generate content. But how do you see from both like Akkio perspective and your personal perspective, but being part of 3D printing company, being part of Sonos and Sony, focused on music and TVs?
I think,
what do you think?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, like, I think large language models will get commoditized like faster than we think, and will be used basically everywhere. Like, Chet Data Prep for us is really the first of like many different user experiences or features that we're going to build that leverage like the possibility of using language to accomplish a task. And I think the norm in 3 to 5 years will be any feature you build takes this into consideration. And maybe eventually we'll get to like direct brain to instruction interface, and you can just think about what you want without having to type it down. But for now, like the ability to make to give people more flexibility in what they want to accomplish, and to make it simpler and easier to understand. Like if you think about what happened with GPT-3, it didn't really break into the mainstream until chat came out, right? Where you could like interact with it in the manner that you kind of expect to interact with things, and it carried a bit of context behind it. And just with that little simple change, suddenly like everyone gets it and can use it. I think interface design, considered interface design, is going to be like a really powerful differentiator as companies start to adopt these technologies in everything they do. And it's going to be wild, like the different places you're going to see it pop up and get used. And yeah, I mean, and companies are getting built entirely on top of these stacks. I don't know how long or how differentiated some of these things will be, because they're like almost like tech demos that will get built into other platforms in some cases. But you're going to see it go everywhere is the bottom line. And that's everything from like education all the way to like how we work. And it's one of those changes that's so impactful. It's really hard to say where it's going to end.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that the way people react, the way people adopt it and use it is going to define how it's going to be like. And I think it's also lead to like the ethics discussion as well. Like how do we regulate around it? How do we define what is possible, what is not? It's very interesting. And then there was that discussion about I've seen a few products out there as well that allows teachers to grade exams, but it also allows students to write exams. So it's an interesting area.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a professor today, you're rethinking your approach to essays, right? Because how do you know if it was actually written by the student or not? And I think it's probably if the student puts very little effort into using a language generator to do it, then you could probably tell. But I think there's probably a lot of students who put a little bit more effort into it, which is still a lot less effort than writing an essay, and it turns out pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that's it. We're almost at time, so I want to thank you once again for joining the session. I really enjoyed our conversation.
It's been great.